Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A bit of an echo there. Welcome to this evening's performance and finance meeting. Eddie, have we got any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I've received apologies from Councillor Mulvaginum and Councillor Olmo. Councillor Sabi Kang is subbing for Councillor Olmo, and Councillor Lee is subbing for Councillor Mulvaginum.
Thank you. And just as we've got a member of the public here, because I never remember the words, do you want to just do the fire briefing?
I can do, thanks, Chair. So there is no fire drill tonight. So if you hear a loud and continuous ring, please leave the building promptly and calmly, going down the stairs outside the council chamber to the assembly point in the Knoll Road car park. Do not use the lift, and the escape in the council chamber should be used as a last resort. And if you have any mobility problems, please wait for direction from myself.
Thank you. I would never remembered all that. Okay, so next item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July. Are we all happy for me to sign those minutes? Agreed, thank you. That. Okay, item 3, any declarations of interest? I'll kick this off. In the annual review, HQL 06 mentions the Club Dean, and HQL 09, Surrey Heath Age Concern. I am involved in both those groups. It's a non-pecuniary interest. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Mears.
Also a non-pecuniary interest in Club Dean.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, that takes us on to item 4. Questions by the public. We have a few questions, and we're going to run through those in a second. Just to say, this is obviously the first time we're doing it at this committee meeting, but it's pretty much going to be the same as what it is at full council. We have an allocated 30 minutes to this. That will be the question to be asked, the answer to be given, and then a follow-up supplementary question. If we are going through the questions and it does go on a bit longer, we are going to stop at 30 minutes. Okay, so just a word of warning in advance on that. That being said, Mr. Bain, I believe you've got the first question, sir. Just there, and if you press the button, it should come light up, and you can actually sit down, you don't have to stand up here.
Before I start, sir, I've been given the questions here, but unfortunately questions 3 and 4 are not on this piece of paper, so if we manage to get to question 3, I'm without questions. Anyway, shall I start?
If you read the first question, we've got the question here, we can make sure you get a copy of that if need be.
Question 1. The peer challenge recently outlined the need for the council to consider reducing the level of resident service provision from a recognised position of gold standard to a lesser bronze standard. Does the committee believe that it should be seeking clarification on this point and in turn understanding how this might impact on the residents in the borough?
Thank you, Mr. Bain. And I have an answer that is relevant from the officers, obviously via this committee. And the answer is, and these will all be in the public domain anyway, the point made by the local government association, LGA Peer Challenge team, was a general point and as such does not require clarification. It recognises that many of the council services are delivered to a very high standard and that in current financial climate it may no longer be affordable for all of these to continue to operate at that level. Making savings via changes to the specification of services is certainly one way to secure the year-on-year cost reductions that are needed, as is the option to increase income generation. The Peer Challenge team have made a number of helpful recommendations, and it is now up to the council to decide precisely what action it takes as a result. Have you got a follow-up question you'd like to ask of that?
No, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. What we're going to do is we're going to go to Mr. Chesney now, and then we'll come back to you, okay?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chesney, you, I believe, I can see you. Hello, good evening to you. Would you like to ask your question, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Roberts, councillors. I'm sorry I couldn't attend in person this evening. I'll keep my question very short, so it won't need that 30 minutes, and I'll read it, and it links to the last question as well. Like most organisations, the council is affected by financial factors outside its control. So what, in the view of this committee, on a scale of 1 to 10, is the probability that the council will be, in effect, be bankrupt in 3 to 4 years? And is that probability based on the assumption of modest or significant or major changes to the council's operations?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chesney. I was just being asked another question, so I'm a man, I can't multitask, so I apologise for that. I have your question here anyway, so that's all fine. We have an answer for that also for you, sir, as per feedback that, again, is in the public domain, which has obviously come from officers. The recent spate of Section 114 notices being issued by local authorities have been due to specific issues pertinent to the individual council and not generic market conditions. However, some of the latest media stories have highlighted a more generic issue with local government around increasing demand pressures combined with the inability to increase spending power in real terms. Surrey Heath Borough Council is not immune to either that increased demand-led expenditure pressure nor the ability to raise funds to support the duties of a district council. Local authorities cannot go bankrupt, as there would be a government intervention if Section 114 notices were to be issued, which would ensure continuity of statutory services to residents. The council would still be able to collect local taxation to support this. The latest medium-term financial strategy demonstrates that the council has reserves balances to allow it to keep functioning, but is facing an outgoing budget deficit And to this end, the administration recognises there is a hard budgetary process ahead to reduce the shortfall between the funding and the expenditure plans, which could mean some difficult decisions around provision of services in terms of both the standard and number of services. Mr Chesney, would you like to ask a follow-up question?
A comment first. I knew that councils can't go bankrupt, which is why my question said, in effect, be bankrupt. And of course, I did ask on a scale of 1 to 10, what was the likelihood of that situation being reached? I don't think I detected a number in your response. And maybe your answer wasn't too explicit regarding whether minor, medium or major changes would be needed in order to avoid that, in effect, bankruptcy.
Mr Chesney, thank you for your follow-up question. There is no number. We have no number. It would be purely speculation. I can certainly leave it with the one foreign officer if he thinks he wants to look at it and able to come up with something in the statutory 7 days. But at this moment, there is no specific number between 1 and 10.
Well, thank you for that statement anyway.
Thank you. Okay, just a point of clarification now. Question 3 I've got is that what I've got in front of me, Eddie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I come in just quickly?
Yeah.
Thanks all for being patient with this. I think by the look of it, there's been some issue with the actual physical printing, but I can see it's here on the PDF. And in terms of the public speaker, I will bring my laptop over so we can read it from there.
Perfect. And I printed off the PDF. So, Mr. Bain, your question number 2.
Question 3. Does the committee agree with many residents that there should be an inquiry, a necessary follow-up to the investigation into the purchase price as to how it is that the council departed from the policy agreed and approved in full council that all borrowing in relation to the acquisition of the retail assets should be long-term, fixed at or around 2.19%. The outcome is that additional debt interest will be a significant drag on the performance of the council, and therefore it must be understood how it was allowed to happen and by what authority. Residents will be paying the costs for many years and will in all probability exceed the capital destruction seen.
Thank you, Mr. Bain. There is no need for an inquiry to be set up as the policy was not agreed, as Mr. Bain states. The report clearly states, as the council did not have the resources to fund this purchase, it would need to be funded through external borrowing. This would most likely come from the Public Works Loans Board, PWL interest rates, which were only fixed when the borrowing was undertaken, were likely to be at 2.19%. Thus, the actual resolution was agreed as the prudential indicators are set out in Annex C to the agenda report be approved and that actual financing of borrowing undertaken be delegated to the Executive Head of Finance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance. And so there was no departure from the policy agreed in Resolution VI, and thus it would not be an appropriate use of the council resources to set up an inquiry. Did you have a supplementary question, Mr. Bain?
I do have an observation. I couldn't find Annex 3 on the website, so I will take the word of the council that the authority was delegated to the chief executive, which does seem to me to be quite a bizarre move when in fact it was agreed in full council, confirmed to me by Richard Brooks on 2 occasions. But the nub of the problem here is that taking the Phoenix Life loan in isolation, the additional cost over the life of the loan is £14 million. And if we have interest rates at the current level for the likely life of the property, that could be another 70-odd million pounds. This is a significant drag on the performance of the council. Residents could be paying this for years and years to come, and I'm astonished that the council will not engage
I'm just
on an
wondering,
internal inquiry.
are you able to ask a question? Because otherwise we're going to be eating into your next questions.
Well, would the council reconsider an inquiry, not an outside inquiry, but an internal inquiry as to what has gone wrong?
Thank you, Mr. Bain. Hang on just one second. How do I scroll down? Thank you, Mr. Bain. The answer I've already given really basically says that we don't think there's a need for an inquiry, and that will be the standpoint at this current moment. If we feel anything different, then we obviously can come back to you in the next 7 days with a response. But that's the answer to that question. Your question number 3, which is question number 4 on the list.
Can I make a suggestion, sir, that my question 4 has basically been answered to Mr. Chesnow, and question 5 has been answered very satisfactorily, in as much as, I'll just read the question. In future, can the committee insist that both the schedule of current borrowing, indicating the term and rate of interest, and the statement of cash projections be included in the pack, as the true test of performance is the cash? Drawing on reserves results in a cash outflow, and the answer given is that this will now be delegated to the Audit Standards and Risk Committee, and I will be attending on the 14th of December.
Brilliant,
Thank you very much.
And just come back to your question 2. The Annex C, which you said you were unable to find, we can make sure we get a copy of that to you.
Is where?
Annex C, you said you were unable to find it.
I couldn't find it on the website.
Yeah, we'll
Send you a copy.
We'll send you. We'll get you a copy.
Thank you.
No problem at all. So that's your last question then.
That's all, my lot. Yeah.
Marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you for the questions. That puts us on to item number 5. Sorry, I thought you saw again. Executive Portfolio Update, Performance and Finance.
Thank you, put my teeth back in. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. So the Performance and Finance Executive Portfolio Holder report obviously is looking at the remit under the portfolio called Performance and Finance. It covers finance and accountancy activities, revenue and benefits, procurement activities, financial governance, and the performance management of the council. There are two key members that support this function: Head of HR, Performance and Communications, and Strategic Director of Finance and Customer Services. This portfolio covers a number of high-volume customer-facing activities which are designed to provide high-quality services to the borough residents. There's a number of transactional services within the portfolio, as well as the statutory services required to provide financial integrity to the council, including production of various financial tools such as the medium-term financial strategy, our annual budget, and the like. Also included is responsibility for the performance management systems, which govern and provide oversight to the quality of the services. There are, as you'll see within the portfolio update, a comment on the outstanding audits. So as you'll be aware, 2019-20 draft financial statements are published on the website, and the remaining 3 years to get us up to date are also in progress of being drafted, ready for their audit when we finally get there. Any questions?
I'm going to take Chair's prerogative just to ask you the first question, and it won't surprise you to ask. It's about the audit. What are the reasons being given for the latest delay in the audit accounts being completed, in view of the fact they are unlikely to be ready for the Audit Standards and Risk Committee, which is on the 14th of December?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to pass over to Mr. Watson on the basis that he's had the latest conversations, but I don't believe that the excuse has changed since previous updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McIntyre. It is one of these sources of frustration that we are constantly trying to enter into dialogue with our auditors. We have not had a great deal of success. We provided them with the information that they asked for in the formats that they asked for and the supporting documentation for them. And this was provided at around the start of October. We actually had confirmation back from the audit manager that the information was what they'd asked for. And since then, we were waiting quite patiently for them to come and do the field work of the audit. Unfortunately, we haven't had that communication from them. I have chased them to say when are they coming in. I fully believe they are, and they're probably not unique in this, waiting to find the outcome of the department's work around closing the accounts and the deadlines. So perhaps when that comes out from the centre government, we may have an idea when they might be coming in to look at our accounts.
Thank you. I'm going to actually ask a follow-up question. So in the paper it says the effects of the delay could mean disclaimed opinion. For this committee, I know we discussed it audit and standards, but it'd be helpful to what does that mean for Surrey Heath?
It means that the auditors will not be able to give an opinion on our accounts, be it a unqualified opinion, which is what we'll be aiming for, or an opinion with a qualification that the accounts are a true and fair view, except for certain areas. And we would have expected to have an unqualified opinion because everything they've asked us to do to change the accounts or correct the information in the accounts we have done. So there would be no grounds, in my view, for a qualification. But if they don't have the time to come in and finish off, then they will probably do a disclaimer in that they've not had time to fully audit the accounts. And that would then possibly feed through into, well, it will certainly feed through into later versions of the accounts, but it's possible that they will also disclaim some of the later accounts that are due to be audited for 2020-21 and 2021-22 by the 31st of March next year. It is unlikely that they would get to that position, and then the 22-23 are due to be done by, I think, for the following March, to be done with that one there. It is now highly likely, in my own view, and it's not a view that I have any evidence on, other than that I think they will be issuing disclaimers on virtually all those accounts going forward. And therefore we are now targeting, as the Council's finance team, other ways we can gain assurance around our accounts. It won't be a full audit, as we can't do that because he's been appointed auditor, but we will be using other advisors to look at our accounts and to point out whether they think there may be areas where we could improve them. So the draft and if possibly disclaimed accounts are published and will be published soon. We would have the greatest level of assurance we can get other than a full audit.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. I'm not going to hog it. Question, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I really enjoyed reading it. It's paragraph 2.22 on page 13. If I could ask about that. It's about the fair funding review and business rates. The fair funding review was originally promised for 2016, and as the paragraph says, it's still not even on the horizon yet. And the business rate reset was promised for 2020. So just on business rates, can you clarify what percentage of business rates that are collected in Surrey Heath actually stay with Surrey Heath Borough Council? Reading the council's website, the MTFS, I think it's got a misprint. It says that 40% are retained by district and borough councils. I think should be reading something like 10%. Could you clarify what percentage we actually do retain after all the slight parts of government have taken a slice?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, it is not so much a minefield, but it's a minefield of percentages around it. And even when the business rates retention was first mooted and put forward, it was almost a new learning curve for everybody who worked with them. So in simple terms, I'll try and keep this simple. We collect the business rates on behalf of everybody within the borough, from the people in there. We have a very high collection rate. Frequently, it's over 99% of the business rates, so a very low level of non-collection, which is, well, it was 2 years ago the best in the country. It's still in the top 5 in the country. When we collect them, we then have to give straight away 50% of that to central government for redistribution around the country. So that's the government take 50%. Now, this is where they get really confusing. They say then, of the remaining 50%, 20% goes to the county, 80% remains with the collection authority, the district, which means you take it 50 to the government, 10 to the county, and 40 to us. I've got you with me so far, which would be great. That's where we get the 40% figure from. Then the government decides whether you are what they class as a top-up authority or a tariff authority. And what they do as a way of equalising, because it used to be redistributed, used to collect everything, give it to the government, they redistributed it. Now they give us a tariff in our case. So we are a tariff-paying authority, which means we then pay a large percentage of our 40% back over to the government, which they can then redistribute to the top-up authorities that require more money. It is one of those ones, and I think the example they always quote is that if you're allowed to retain it as per the original plans were, Westminster would probably have a higher GDP than most small countries because the business rates they collect, we are not in that bracket. So, as you say, the actual percentage we retain potentially 2 million out of the 33 million that we collect. So it is around that 10% figure you suggested it was. I think it's about 14, but it's... So hopefully I've not lost anybody on the business rates, but that's a merry-go-round. In terms of the fair funding review and the business rates reset, I've been talking with other Section 151 officers. We always put pressure onto any government minister. We get the opportunity to say, when is it coming? Realistically, and we've now seen the King's speech come out, there is nothing on it in any of the King's speeches coming through. So the chances are it will not be in this parliamentary session. And the indication is, as I've put in the report, when it's likely to happen. The good news around it is actually the business rates reset will not benefit the council. It will take us back. So we've managed to retain the growth that we've put in since the last reset. So keeping my fingers crossed, touching wood and my lucky rabbit's foot and everything else, the longer they can delay it, the better off we will be in terms of our budgeting.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Kang. Oh, sorry.
Yes, staying on that page, 217, you've got new auditors in 2023, 24. Your also statement to disclaimer on previous audits, would that sort of linger on?
Thank you, Councillor Kang. The indications from the government is that they would do the ability to disclaim the accounts up until the 31st of March 2023. That's coincided to bring us in line with the new appointment, because obviously it's not just us getting new auditors. There's a major shift round. A number of those that were doing audits have left the local government audit market, BDO being one of them. We have grant funding coming through. So what would happen is that the government expects us to be able to, almost with a reset by the disclaimers, catch up and then produce the accounts within the timescales there. What it will mean is that there will be very likely a qualification on the opening balances from the new audit firm. Normally the audit firms will go back, look at the last year and reassure themselves that the closing balances from the previous year are the right balances to roll forward into the opening balances of the new year. And because they can't put any reliance on the previous audit or won't have anything they can actually rely on, it's likely that they will put a qualification on the account saying we were unable to verify the opening balances, but touching wood, everything else is tickety-boo and in format with a technical accounting term, tickety-boo. Yeah.
Tickety-boo, yeah.
Thank you. Any other? Oh, blimey. Councillor O'Mahony first, and I think Councillor Lee, and then Councillor Quinn.
Good evening. It's point number 3.8 on page 15. The council tax collection target, and then the figures after that. I just wondered if you could, I'm guessing it's to do with direct debits over a course of 12 months, but can you just advise why there's a disparity between the target and the existing figure?
Sorry, which were the bullet points? Are you looking at the council tax collection?
It's nearly the last bullet point. It's the fourth from the bottom. Council tax collection target, 98.5%.
Yes.
And then after that, we have the current position as at the 5th of November, showing 73.9.
So yes. I think it's because it's a pro rata basis, and I was going to ask exactly the same question.
It is exactly that. The majority of our direct debit council taxpayers will pay on 10 monthly direct debits. Okay. So people get the, I use inverted commas, the free 2 months at the end of the year that people always seem to appreciate. The reason why we tend to go for 10 months is obviously if somebody misses a payment, we've still got time within that financial year to catch up the payments with the individual, rather than putting them into next year, starting with a deficit balance. So you will always have that slight skew that we will collect more, and then the last 2 months we'll collect, hopefully we'll, by the end of January, we'll be at the 98.5.
So we're expected still to hit that target based on current collection?
Yeah, that's the indications we're getting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn. Councillor Lee first, then Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to step back to the business rates piece. I may have missed the percentage that we get to keep. If you could just refresh my little brain on that, I'd be appreciative. Oh. Are you a ventriloquist?
Sorry, not one of the skills I do possess. I sometimes wish I could. Sorry, to give you the exact percentages, I have to go and do the calculation. I can pass that to you there. The amount we're allowed to retain is 40%. It's the amount of the tariff becomes. So it swaps from being a percentage to an exact figure. So we retain.
It was the final percentage.
Yes,
that
about
was after.
2 million out of the 33 or so that we collect.
Is that the about 2 million? What's the range of that? Could it be as low as 1 million? Could it be as high as 3 million? How much?
I'd suggest, without going back and checking the figures, it's about 2.2.
2.2 million. Awesome, thank you. And then what's the impact of non-payment on the amount we're allowed to keep, i.e. do we forfeit any of that percentage when there's non-payment of NDR?
We do forfeit it. It's same with council tax. We forfeit it on the collection fund, not on the council's own accounts initially. So any forfeiture or non-collection in terms of council tax means the county takes the bigger hit of it as they get the bigger shared council
I was looking specifically on NDR.
Business rate, same thing again. Non-collection will be split on that. 50 to the government, 10 to the county, 40 to us, and then we pay the tariff being an absolute sum. So therefore, anything we collect over and above our targeted amount actually benefits us better off because we get to keep more of the excess on it that we collect. So yes, everybody shares the non-collection.
If you could confirm those two figures, the total amount in
And then
pounds
the
that we
percentage,
retain
yes.
and the percentage, I'd be
I will
really
do.
grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Quinn.
Following on from the previous answers given by Mr. Watson about audit, I just want to fully understand the implications. So is it the case that because of our auditing problems and delays, we'll never be able to have complete and fully signed off audits in Surrey Heath ever again? Because surely the disclaimers will just continue to roll over in each audit indefinitely, potentially forever. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. The government has, in its fixing local government audit process and proposals, has agreed that disclaimers, if they go through, and they still haven't actually announced it as a policy they can run through with, but it will only go up until the 22-23 accounts, as at the 31st of March 2023, which means that the next set of accounts, 23-24, will be, as I said, potentially qualified on the opening balances. But once this closed accounts and they're signed off, there should be a return to normal, in that we will then produce accounts, they will get audited within the correct timescales, and they will either be qualified or unqualified, depending on the opinion of the auditors. So what the government is doing is trying to reset it and give everybody the chance to catch up. But they have said that once we've caught up, they will not tolerate the same situation happening again and again. And that's something they need to work with the auditors on. It's something they need to work with councils on. It's something they need to work with CIPFA, the Chartered Institute Public Finance Accountants, who publish the guidance around where they are. There has always been a move to try and simplify the accounts. I think the last time they tried to simplify the accounts, they increased the number of pages we had to produce. I'll leave it a bit cynical, but...
Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Watson, paragraph 3.5, the government placed the responsibility for making the payments of help with energy cost for those not directly connected, costing 103,000. Was there any central government funding towards this, or where has that money come from?
Thank you, Councillor Noble. This was the household support for the energy payments from the government. So we were a payments agency on behalf of the government. They provided the actual amounts we pay, and we paid it, and then we actually were able to take a very, very small, we got a Section 31 grant, which is new burdens, that helps us cover the cost of having to pay them. So it was just basically the £150 to all Band D households and below, plus a certain discretionary amount that we were able to give out under a scheme. And it was all paid out. It was all paid out on time, and it was all paid out very efficiently.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo-Cam. I saw you both there tonight, so I apologise for that earlier on.
Yes. 3.7. What's the trend in terms of commercial properties and obviously collection of business rates? Is it going down? I mean, is more and more business getting sort of dissolved? Are there more businesses coming into the area? Because the figures sort of saying going from 96 down to 94.
Sorry, the number of commercial properties I think we've had is the third from bottom of the page bullet point, 2,970, and the previous year it was 2,958. So obviously the number of properties we've got that we're collecting rates from has very, very slightly increased, virtually stayed the same. But obviously what happens is that every year the government does a revaluation, and they set the valuations which we claim the business rate take on. So the rateable value gets adjusted, and then we collect a multiplier of that, and the multiplier, I think, at this point in time is running about 48.4%, I think it is, but I will stand corrected on that one. So we collect the multiplier of the rateable value, and that gets changed by the government on an annual basis. They reset it.
So the question is, are we going to collect more the following year, or is the trend going down? That's one.
I can't answer that question accurately because I don't know what the government's going to do with the multiplier at this point in time. We will get indications of what it's going to be before we send the bills out, because obviously we need the multiplier to work out what the bill should be, and then we send out the bill, and that will then be able to work from that our total business rate take.
Chair, if I can also just comment. So if there are less businesses operating in the borough, either because they close up shop and they demolish their building, or in some cases we see office accommodation being converted into residential, then that's a net reduction in the number of organisations paying business rates, and that could impact on the numbers. But as Mr. Watson said, the government's own action around the rateable values, which aren't under our control, is also another variable that impacts on the amount of money that we collect.
Mr. Watson wants to come back in as well.
Yeah, just to say on the rateable value, it's not the same for so the multipliers, but the values get changed as well. So this last time they did a revaluation on them, the cost of offices went very high. The cost of retail came very down, almost reduced by 50%, some of the retail business rates. So the government uses it as a lever around supporting the economy and things like that.
Okay, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come back to the NDR again. So in certain circumstances, we owe businesses who operate in the borough money. I think Sainsbury's Supermarket's a good example. I think that's a 6-figure sum we currently owe Sainsbury's. Does that have any impact on our accounts at the moment, and do you know when that will likely be settled?
So the only reason I can see why we would owe businesses is, firstly, if they've overpaid, and very few businesses do overpay, but secondly, they will seek an appeal against the valuation of their premises. I think there was quite a few cases going back from the supermarkets where they used to have cash point machines outside in their car parks, and initially they were assessed for business rates and then got taken out of ratings, and they got rebates based on that. So if Sainsbury's have a rebate, we will have taken it into account when we do our figures, because we're just waiting them to say, can we have it, and we pay it back to them. But it comes out of the overall collection fund that goes in there. So the impact on the council would be, if it takes it out a lot, and I do know a council I've worked at where they demolished a power station, which was a major payer of rates. It was taken out of valuation, and what they do is they drop what they call a safety net. So the government works out what we think we should be getting, and we will never fall below 92.5% of what they believe our take to be. Currently, we're above our take, which is why we've got the benefits and we don't want the reset. If you're actually below, you would really appreciate the reset because it comes back to where your current value is.
I was more driving in terms of the Sainsbury's example, which I think is Watchmore Park, which you're correct, it is a revaluation. I was just wondering when the money would be transferred back to them and how that would impact any of our finances.
It will not, as I say, not impact us because we will take it through the collection fund account and we've probably adjusted for it already based on the evaluations. In terms of how it will impact us is obviously we've got to pay the money to them. But we've had it in, so therefore it will affect potentially our cash flow as we go through. So we need to work out when we're paying it, and then we'll work out, just make sure we've got money in the bank to pay that sort of thing, depending on the amount of it is there. I'll ask the questions of the team and see where we are with it and when we're looking to pay them.
I think some of the money's owed for a few years looking at it, and I was wondering if it would be accruing interest and whether it would be in our interest to keep that on deposit or whether it's better to give it back.
It will only be accrued for a few years because the valuation would have been backdated, or the revaluation. So they will get it in there. We have quite a few occasions where the valuations, people do challenge and appeal them. We're able to then take it through the collection fund that we have in there. We have a provision for appeals in there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I think we've given that quite a big chunk. So thank you very much for all your questions and your time putting the report together. We will move on to item 6, which is portfolio update, resident and community services.
Hello, good evening, thank you. I'm not going to go through this, you'll be delighted to know word for word, but just briefly, this portfolio has thus far been an absolute pleasure. It's a lovely one in that it's got lots of items in it that are different from the others, rather than being a whole sort of pop like some of the portfolios are, which has left it, has certainly been a pleasure so far. So moving into it then, the car parking, as you can see, we have, before I move on, I'd just like to make reference before I go into the parking in detail. There's a small error on page, what I have here as 18, paragraph 2.1 of the report, starts taken back management of what should read on-street parking. It doesn't, it reads off, and it should receive on-street parking. I'm afraid I need to apologise for that. Unfortunately, it did get missed. So as I say, 2.1 is on-street parking. So moving on to it, you'll see from the report here that we've got various proposals coming up for the parking across the borough in both the town's multis and the car parks out in the villages and in the more rural areas in town as well. Some of them, those at the moment, as you can see from these figures, the turnovers for the car parking. There are various projects going forward. For example, as you can see, we're just considering cashless payments. We're going to be in need of a new automatic number plate recognition system for the multis here. So there's things that we're looking into, new CCTV systems. There's certainly on the parking front. There's lots of up and comings. Like a few things on this portfolio, there are going to be some very difficult decisions to come in the not too distant future with quite a lot of this. But the car parking particularly is waiting at the moment on the parking strategy, which the team is currently undertaking for us. And we're hoping to be able to present proposals to the exec in the new year. Moving on, the next part is community safety. Again, we continue to work, as you can see, with different partners. As you know, the public space protection orders went through executive a few months ago and are now working another 3-year run as such. So that's, again, all going well. Community Services Partnership is the services that we provide in conjunction with Runnymede. You can see from the report it concerns the community alarms and telecare, the community transport system, meals at home, social prescribing, and the Windle Valley Centre. These are all, as I say, services that are provided in partnership with Runnymede, and the points are here on each of those, and if there's any questions on those services, then we'd be more than happy to answer them. The customer services element of the portfolio, again, is you can see that officers have provided extremely in-depth figures and information on how customer service is going, in particular the contact centre. Then finally, the residents' experience, that different sorts of projects are coming up. We've had an initiative today that we've been working on with the police in connection with knives amnesty, so we've been doing that. And also we are due to discuss at executive in November the quality assurance measures that we're looking to take forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have some questions, but I will save them this time around. I'll give everybody else a chance first. Any questions? Councillor Mears, then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Page 19, item 3.3, about the new ANPR system. I wonder why are we replacing it, or is it more of a vanity project and there's benefits of a newer system?
Thank you. It's being replaced due to its age and the it being fit for purpose. Mr Stevens, I'm sure, will provide more details.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Yes, so the ANPR system has effectively been in place for coming close to 10 years now. And we know that the hardware and the software is becoming quite archaic. A classic example I know that the Chair will be aware of, where recently at the theatre during heavy rainfall, the ANPR cameras don't pick up vehicle licence plates, so you can pay for your parking but not necessarily be able to get out. So we are mindful that there are issues with the current system that we have. We also are at the point where we are at the end of the contract. The contract allowed us a set period and then an opportunity to extend. We've gone to that point, so by the time we get to June, we do need to replace the contract, the software and the hardware.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Next we had Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report. Again, page 21 on paragraph 4.8 is about the public space protection orders. And I remember when this went through the executive a couple of months ago, I had a couple of owners of play parks get in touch, and I referred them to the council because they would like to have dog control orders as well. They weren't on the initial list. I'm just wondering if any new dog control orders have been put in place since then.
Thank you. I do recall the officer getting in touch and going to visit Windlesham, wasn't it? That's right. I don't know, I have to confess, I don't know what the outcome was, but I thought the officer, did she not get back in touch with you? She was going to come back to you about it.
I haven't heard anything personally, but I mean, I haven't had any complaints either, so they might well have been happy.
Can I ask her to get in contact with you directly? Because I'm sure she did meet with the resident down there and proceeded from there. So if we can take a note of a way to do that, that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Thanks.
Jane.
Thank you. Councillor Rakes.
13, page 24. Thank you. Sorry, point number? 513. So that's refers to the DRT, the demand responsive travel. Having heard one of the county councillors waxing lyrical about it last night, and he certainly suggested that it would be quite widely adopted quite quickly. I was a bit confused about the role of the borough council in terms of that, which he suggested would replace possibly some regular bus services. So I wondered if you could clarify. I'm also intrigued by the comment that it would be difficult to partner with SEC on it.
Chair, if I may respond to that. Thank you, Councillor Rakes. I'm really pleased that we've got Darren Williams, who is the Corporate Head of Community Services on behalf of Runnymede and Surrey Heath, virtually attending. He will be able to give you a far more comprehensive answer in relation to DRT than I can, because he's very close to this.
Over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Throughout the work that's been undertaken, Chief Executive has heard about the demand responsive service and pilot in Mole Valley, and I know that we've spoken about that since. We've had a series of conversations and meetings with the County Council about the future rollout of demand responsive travel across Surrey. We were working on the direction of the opportunity to partner on DRT with our community transport service, effectively providing part of that network, similarly to the pilot that currently operates in Mole Valley. However, in more recent time, we've been informed that it's the intention of the County Council to actually put their demand responsive travel routes out to tender, and they will be fixed routes as opposed to rolling around communities, so to speak. And therefore, for us to maximise the potential of our community transport service in demand responsive travel is difficult, because the County Council tendered service, I believe, will be able to accept concessionary fares bus passes. Community transport generally doesn't, and if we did, it would have a financial impact. So we haven't given up on this. It's a never say never. However, we're keen to see what partnership opportunity there is to maximise travel opportunities for all residents working with the Surrey County Council. And I think that would have been easier to realise had the decision not been taken to go out to competitive tendering on the part of the County Council. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. That's much clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
I have two questions, if that's okay. First one is page 19, 3.2, the comment that it's proposed that the service moves towards cashless payments by 24-25. I, as an older person, don't like that. I was in Bracknell the other day, and they have two machines side by side, one that you can use cash and one that is cashless. And I have to say, the queue on the cash one was quite a long queue by older members of the public. Is there any chance that this could be moved to later? Maybe. The second question is to do with the Windle Valley Day Centre. Good while ago, it was agreed that there was going to be a Wi-Fi facility put in there so that it could be rented out more readily. And also, I haven't seen any advertising regarding the renting out of the Windle Valley Day Centre, and I just wondered if there was any plans to do some advertising for it.
Thank you, Councillor White. You've taken one of my questions, which was about the cashless. No, it's fine. Saves, I can cross it off my list. I think Mr. Stevens was going to. I think Mr. Stevens was going to put his hand up. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor White. It's very odd. So, in relation to cashless, we're seeing a shift from people utilising cash to utilising the app payments, such as Ringo, that we have for our car parks. What we don't have in the rural and village car parks at the moment is contactless payments, but we anticipate that if that was introduced, that would further reduce the quantum of people that are utilising cash to pay for parking. This will come forward as part of the parking strategy, and obviously that will be considered then by executive amongst a series of other recommendations as to how we enhance and improve the parking experience for our customers. It could very well be at that point in time the decision isn't made, but in truth there are challenges around cash handling for our car parks. There's the cost of people emptying the meters, there's the risk of people breaking into the meters and stealing the money. There's the challenge that actually some of the coins jam the meters that we have at the moment, and that causes huge problems in terms of maintenance, repair and replacement. And as I said earlier on, there is also a cultural shift towards not necessarily people using the apps. I still think there's some apprehension around that, but certainly around contactless payments, that is on the exponential increase. So this is just us effectively moving with the times. There are other councils that have already shifted to completely contactless payments, and that has worked very effectively for them. We acknowledge it's not for everyone, but we will look at interim solutions and alternative methods of payment wherever we possibly can.
Can I just, I know there was a second question, but on that, because so the cashless I get, I suppose I have an issue with it as well for exactly the same reason. So I'm glad it's coming through, and the paper's coming here first, I believe, anyway, so we can have a discussion about it then. As we know from planning, there are more and more old people coming to Surrey Heath because we're building more and more care homes, etc. So, and I know from my side, from my parents, they don't necessarily do cashless. So it's obviously something we need to consider. I suppose the other consideration is, if someone hasn't got cash and it is only contactless, will they get a ticket? That's obviously something as part of the paper, because if they get a ticket and they can't pay because they haven't got contactless, then you're going to have a whole raft of people complaining that they can't pay for their tickets, parking tickets, and then get a parking ticket. It's just a point going through my brain. Now, I know Councillor Wheeler was going to, but I think you've got a question reference to Windlebrook as well. Is that, Windle Valley Wi-Fi. And I'll come to you next, Councillor Wheeler.
Well, we're all jumping to answer this, aren't we? I can see that Darren's thrown his camera back on eagerly in relation to the Wi-Fi, so I'm sure he'll want to answer this one. Back to you, Darren.
Okay, thank you, Chair. It was just to make sure Nick answered it correctly, but I will give it my shot. Basically, the conversation about installation in Wi-Fi hasn't gone away. I think it's fair to say, as is alluded to within the report, that in the last 9 months we've really been focusing on a different area. But I know that with Nick and with Councillor Whitcroft, this conversation has been had, and I would expect that to be considered further in the coming future. The issue about promotion and marketing, I think there is a question that has been running through my head, given that we have promoted it via Heath Scene, we have promoted it via social media, we have promoted it via our website, actually as to whether there truly is the demand that we were once perhaps led to understand that potentially there is for such a facility. Again, I think there's a need to continue to push that promotion and marketing, but with a new team of staff and obviously a member of staff there in a management role currently who is very accommodating for anyone's requirements. I would say, Councillor White, if you know of anyone in the local area looking to hire the facility, certainly we are keen to welcome them in. But that's as much as I can say at this point. Thank you.
I know Councillor White's waving her pen at me, so quick comeback.
Is a quick. The complaints I've had from people is the fact that they've got to ring Runnymede and they feel that they shouldn't have to ring Runnymede. Is there any way that it can be done through our call centre, a booking system? See Nick shaking his head saying no.
Respectfully, we asked them actually to contact the day centre directly, I believe, in the first instance. But I'll double check that, and if we're not, then we certainly can change that. That's probably the easiest way to make a change. We're very keen to make sure we promote the 01276, so the locality of the service offer within our partnership. So I'll certainly look into that.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, I think, was next, and then Councillor Whitcroft, David Whitcroft, that is.
Thank you. I just have a couple of outstanding questions. So it's not going to surprise anybody at all that I'm going to bang on about the car park in Cheltenham. So at the moment, almost 50% of people are able to park there for free, which is to support the use of the Sangs area versus people going onto the commons. As everybody is aware, the whole purpose of the Sangs in Chobham is to mitigate the risk of new homeowners impacting the SSSI, which is very close to the common. So I am wanting to make sure that the top of everybody's mind is the fact that at the moment that is the only Sangs car park which has any costs associated with it, potentially for people. So I am making the blind assumption that the 1 hour free parking will remain. I also have concerns about cash, particularly as if we look at the moment of the amount that people are spending in car park, and certainly in my rural car park, only 20% of people remain for more than 4 hours. And bucking the trend is that the number of season tickets that have been purchased and the revenue from season tickets has actually increased. So that again is something that I would look to support. My question, which I'm not looking for an answer for in this meeting, but I would like a written answer if at all possible, is what is the cost of running the car parks? And how is that broken down? So, for example, if we're going out to new ANPR recognition cameras, what's the cost? What's the payback period? And on top of that, the ticketing, the maintenance, the cleaning, etc., etc., etc. Where is our profit? So, is it profitable? Or actually would be better just to knock them all down and have a bare piece of ground on the road that we didn't bother to maintain, but we allowed people to park for free. So if I could have that back, please. I'm assuming it would come through in quite some detail for the paper when it comes forward anyway, for the parking strategy. But I just wanted to point out those other points. So if I could have confirmation that we can get that, thank you.
Before I get you to answer, can I just pick up on something? Because I've looked at the figures, and I actually see a decrease in car park season tickets, which is what I was going to ask a question of, because 21-22 it was 97,000, 22-23 is 98,000, but we had a 5% increase, which would be a net decrease as I see it, and it's only a very small amount. So I was going to ask a question about the season ticket. So can we throw that on the back of that as well, reference season ticket?
Just to say, it is elsewhere, but not in Chobham.
Oh, okay. You're right. It's gone up by about a small percentage. Okay, fair enough. yeah. Okay. So a question about season tickets, I suppose. Really, is it? It doesn't seem to be making a lot of difference, but it'd be interesting to see.
Does in rural areas.
Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. So, taking those in order then, in relation to Chobham Water Meadows car park and the 1 hour free, as part of the strategy, we're looking at every individual car park on its merits and making recommendations about improvements and charging structures. So, clearly we acknowledge the fact that it has a mixed use, that car park. It does obviously facilitate people accessing the Sangs to keep them away from the triple SI, as you rightly say, but it also operates as a car park for a village centre. As I say, we'll take all of them on their merits, but that will be taken into account. In terms of cash in car parks, that is duly noted, and you did ask for figures earlier on today which have been provided to this committee, which do indicate the percentage shares and the shift between Ringo and cash payments. And as I said earlier, we are seeing a shift more towards app-based payments. Written answer on the cost of running the car parks, that will be incorporated in the strategy. Clearly, we do need to set out the revenue and capital costs that we're incurring, and then how the income in relation to parking offsets that. So that will come forward, Councillor Wheeler. And in relation to season ticket reduction, we'll look at that, and I will ask Julia and our new parking manager, Alan, to provide you with a detailed answer on that one, if that's okay.
Thank you. Just a point. I've got a point here anyway, and we're talking about figures. When the paper comes, is it possible not just to have values, but to have numbers of users rather than values as well?
I'm looking up at the screen, Chair, and hoping that Julia's taking due note of that.
Because we know, because the prices have gone up, obviously the values have gone up, and you can work the figures out, but it would be nice to see numbers as well. Thank you. Councillor Whitcroft was next, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to speak up on behalf of the very old people of Surrey Heath, of whom I am one, as is well known within this chamber. I'm not exactly the world's greatest advocate of computerisation, although I have actually spent some time today looking at some more advanced techniques which I decided to leave to others. But I will make the point that I do use, and so do a lot of other older people, contactless payments in car parks, strangely enough. And so do I use credit cards and even debit cards in car parks as well. I don't find it a particular problem, but I do think, on a serious note, if the strategy could include a communication strategy to get this across to people, in particular the benefits that they would have in terms of the potential savings going forward, if we can reduce the cost of the operation of the car parks, I think that would be critically important. Thank you.
Okay, I'm conscious of time, so Councillor Lee, then Councillor Sang, and we'll call it, Kang, sorry, good grief. And I'll call it a day after that, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was certainly witness to Councillor Whitcroft very competently using contactless to purchase me a very tasty beer. It was certainly easier than using cash. Having turned to the Bank of England, who obviously issue our currency, there is a stark increase in the amount of cash in circulation. But it's not the coins for parking meters, it's banknotes, probably to feather mattresses. So I think we do have to be quite careful in terms of where we drive that messaging. And I think Councillor Whitcroft's absolutely right. Many older people are very comfortable using bank cards now. I mean, in fact, they feel safer rather than carrying £150, £200 around in cash and being mugged for that very valuable money. So I think we have to look at both sides of the coin there. Common strategy, I have no doubt Councillor Whitcroft will be all over that. The one thing that worries me is some of the spending that's mentioned here, and obviously the state of some of the assets that we've inherited is quite scary. Where was that previous investment before Councillor Whitcroft shone a light on some of the quite serious situations we've uncovered?
Thank you for your comments. And just reverting back to the cashless payments for a minute, when we discussed this initially, my reaction was, as some of you have gone, oh no, with the elderly and everything. And when we actually looked at how much was cash and how much was contactless, I was absolutely staggered how much of it actually was contactless payments. In fact, I think I said to Mr. Stevens at the time, no, you've got that wrong, you've got to go and have another look. But yeah, at first, as I say, that was my initial reaction, but we need to be certain, and the review will show exactly the business case for the entire parking system across the borough. And I think we can't really make decisions or begin to think about it really before we've seen the strategy. So we will obviously be bringing that forward as we've discussed. In terms of the previous investment and why things are as they are, I'm afraid I just can't answer that one.
Right, Councillor Sabi Kang was first, and if she's got a quick question, I might be able to fit someone else in afterwards.
It's just a follow-on from the contactless and the cash. And we shouldn't underestimate our elderly customers or residents or anything like this. Because if you educate them, they are really good. And contactless is the best way, I would say, to introduce in the car. Because the amount of coins being distributed out to customers nowadays is very, very low. So the customers and the banks are not nearby to go and get them, and the post offices are not very far. So having seen that trend go down, I think and also the 50p's and the pound coins, which if you're paying £1.50 and you've got £2 coin, the change is not coming out. So the customer's actually going to lose out. So they probably echo that, and they probably appreciate us having the contactless. And all we need to do is just educate, have somebody standing there, and it's much safer. So I actually agree on that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wheeler was waving her hand, and we're just about on time, so I'll give you another chance.
Thank you. I promise to be very quick. I'm quite sure that given that the current administration are very keen on engagement and involvement, we will have plans to go out to our residents to get their views on this before we do anything. I'm kind of making that assumption, otherwise it would be incredibly hypocritical if we didn't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I think that's it for that. So thank you very much, and thank you to all the officers that pulled those papers together. These figures don't suddenly appear as if by magic, so thank you for everybody that was involved in that. If you are not involved in the rest of the meeting, you are more than welcome to leave, but you're going to be here for the rest of the night. Right, okay, so that takes us on to item 7, which is the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge, and that is being led by... Oh, okay. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett, and thank you, members. So you'll recall that we had a corporate peer challenge that took place in July this year. This is something that's offered to all local authorities, and as a council, I think the last time we had a corporate peer challenge was about 7 years ago. The report arising from the peer challenge was published last month on our website, and it was published on the Local Government Association website. The focus of a corporate peer challenge is really about identifying opportunities for improvement. And to assist us, the peer challenge team consists of members and officers with a variety of areas of expertise. In fact, this peer challenge had 2 Section 151 officers on them. And their job is to look at our documentation, our reports, to speak to our members, our officers, our stakeholders, and identify areas for improvement. They identified 9 recommendations. They're set out in the report, and there is a requirement for us to develop an action plan and publish an action plan in response to those recommendations. The draft action plan is set out in the papers. It's very much a long list. I think it's longer than most action plans I've seen of this type. And so I'm very keen to make sure that we end up in the final version with a shorter list with the things that we believe will have the most direct impact towards those recommendations. And with that in mind, I'd very much welcome any feedback from this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. And I'm going to do Chair's prerogative again, because we're leading on from your very last point, and I've got one question and then one comment. What I did note from this, there are 21 actions which have all got to be completed by April. So whilst I appreciate there are a lot of actions, is there going to be a time constraint to be able to turn those actions around? I know you're talking about prioritising, etc. Obviously, I'm conscious there's a lot of work involved in that. So is it achievable? Do we need to maybe massage those targets? So yeah, just a comment on the time, I suppose.
Thank you, Chair. That's a really good question. There were two things. One is that the peer challenge team will come back and visit us. We initially thought it might be April, but I think just because that's likely to be a holiday period, it may well be another month later. Now, when they come back, they're looking for strong evidence of progress. They're not necessarily looking at everything on that action plan being complete. Clearly, if we haven't started implementing, aren't part way across a particular item, they might express concern, but there isn't automatically an expectation that they will all be completed in that timescale. What they're looking at is a strong indication of progress. Now, in relation to your other question, there is a risk. The more that we put in that action plan, the greater the risk that we won't be able to implement them. And so there's a judgment around how robust the action plan is compared to the recommendations they raise and the likelihood that we will be able to deliver them. And I would suggest, given all the other things that are going on at the moment, the action plan, the final action plan, will need to be shorter.
Thank you. Comment, and then I'll open up to the floor. On page 18, there was and I can't remember what the exact wordings were, so I'm going to quickly go to it. First item is create a continuous member development plan informed by members to support, which I totally agree with. I would also suggest maybe we need to do a councillor skills audit. That I don't think that's something we've done before, and I think it might be something worthwhile doing and adding into that part of it as well, so we can see what the skills are in the room. So that would it's just a suggestion on my part on that point. Okay, Councillor Kumul Kang, and then it's Councillor Wheeler, and then Councillor Wilson.
A lot of these recommendations, are some of those recommendations higher up the list that we need to achieve? I mean, should they not be graded as in terms of, priority, something which we are sort of aiming for? These seem to be all sort of classed as one. Are they how many would you say were the ones that you really need to focus on?
Councillor Kang, thank you very much, Chair, thank you. I have a very clear view, and I think if the peer challenge team were here today, they would have a clear view, although I appreciate they haven't expressed it just by listing the recommendations in the way they have. I think the primary focus of those recommendations is on moving the council's finances back to a sustainable position. So if there was a hierarchy, that would be at the top of the hierarchy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Having had a look at this, I have to say some of them I'm quite surprised by, because I think there's some things that we do very well, and that yet they're here as a recommendation. The comment I would, or the recommendation that I would like to suggest is that when we are reviewing all of our policies and all of our processes, we look at how they contribute to these recommendations. So, for example, we've recently brought about a menopause policy. We're looking at different ways in which we are able to review and support our staff, and they contribute very much to fulfilling some of the recommendations that are here. So I wonder if, when reviewing documentation moving forward, in the same way that if we had a clear values statement, we would assess each action against our values statement and where it contributes to it. We look at recording where each of the things that we are doing anyway contribute to the recommendations that we have in front of us.
Councillor Wheeler, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I absolutely agree. There are so many good things the Council is doing at the moment and bringing forward, and wherever we can, we should be looking at the links between those things that we might have done anyway, that we might have done even before the peer challenge started, and show the links between them, because they all contribute to the items listed there. So, completely agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson was next, then Councillor Mears.
Yeah, I think there's 28 different actions, actually, and I agree it's a lot of actions.
There was 28 in total. There's 21 by April, because I went through them. So there's 21 for April. You're right, there's 28 in total, but I was just looking up to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was just looking because I knew they were coming in April, so that's why I looked at 21, but you're correct, yeah.
Yeah, but just to back up with what Councillor Kang was saying, they're obviously not all equal. Some are massively more important than others. 28 is a lot of actions, but some of them are already complete. Like 2E, as we saw today, the very first ever committee question time for the public, which was really gratifying to see, and thank you, Chair, and thank you, officers, for facilitating that.
Thank you. Councillor Mears.
I agree with Councillor Wheeler that some of these seem like things that we're already doing very well. One in particular, developing a digital vision that reflects engagement with staff and residents. With the new website, we're all sat here with iPads, laptops, we've got people joining on Zoom. We seem quite digital already. And the action of using AI technology, I just wanted to stress that that's something we need to be very, very careful about, considering the sensitivity of the business that this council does. And if it has to sort of look at this AI's work by learning of what users are putting into them. So it's quite risky.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Yes, there is more that we don't know about the risks and the operation of AI than we do. I think it's very much for the public sector at a fairly experimental stage. I think it will have a significant impact on the way that we deliver services in the future, but I don't think we're ready for a wholesale shift at this point. I agree also with the comments that we are in a really strong position in terms of the council's approach to digital. I think we have some of the best technology infrastructure that you could have in any council. I think we have a very strong team that has done all the right things in terms of shifting a lot of our systems into the cloud, significantly reducing our risks to issues like cybercrime and kind of maintenance failures. But as always, it's an area that's constantly evolving. And some of the things that the peer challenge identified for improvement were things that we felt we were already good at. But we were very clear in the peer challenge that we didn't want to be complacent. And if there were things that they could identify to enable us to go even further, that we would embrace them. And I think in some cases, that's exactly what they've given us.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Those stinky iron horses, we don't want those coming through our town. And we'll have the man with the red flag walking in front of that noisy car. We kind of need to be embracing those modern technologies with both hands. I think we need to be realistic about where our technology utilisation is here in this council, and just be acutely aware AI isn't coming. Councillors are using it on a daily basis. County councillors are using it to write articles. Okay, some of them blow up in their faces because they're a bit embarrassing, but it's out there now. ChatGPT is free. Members of the public are already using it. We don't want to get left behind. Staff will already be quietly using ChatGPT to do bits and pieces of work through their own accounts to save time. It's a huge opportunity for us that we need to embrace with both hands. I think in terms of our cyber piece, it's something I led on to make sure that we now audit our cyber stuff on an annual rather than 3-yearly basis. Although, to be fair, that should be a continuous audit. So I think we need to be acutely aware of where we're at and where we need to get to. But of course, these things cost money. And that kind of leads to that first point, and that's probably one of the most important, which is about a sustainable budget. Because at the moment, we ain't sustainable, are we? Let's be honest. We are spending on the credit card every single month. And at some point, the credit card's going to be maxed out. There'll be an interest bill too. So I think we just need to take one step back and look at the LGA recommendations and understand that some of them are actually good enablers for us. I think we should embrace it with both hands. And after all, there was a right to respond as they were asking questions and present evidence. So I think it's looking at it as a balance.
Thank you. Councillor O'Mahony.
The question of AI, machine learning, most people don't really know much about it. Many people are quite scared about it. Would it be an idea for the IT department here to do a small presentation to say how we're not going to have artificial intelligence running the council anytime soon. But maybe the IT department here could give us some examples of where these machine learning things can come in and help out. They can reduce costs, increase efficiency, just to put people's minds at ease.
I think one of the things which is actually in the peer challenge recommendations is around member development and member training. That could include the briefings that we do from time to time, and they could be something on the role of AI as we see it at the moment. And I think it is true that I use it, and many of my colleagues use it. For example, if you're developing something new, and you don't have an example of it, you can go in and say, give me an example of a policy on this, or a procedure on that. I think that's really useful. Where it's more challenging, as an example, I think there were some pilots looking at whether you can process a planning application through AI. And the challenge there is that you have to put information in, and then to get the information out. And where's that information going, and who's processing it, and how might it be used in a way that is more problematic, particularly if you're putting information in that involves personal information. So there are risks associated with it, but I think it is here, and it is being used in a variety of different ways. As a local authority, we face greater risks. We have to have greater safeguards. We have to have greater levels of assurance. But it is a topic worthy of discussion, and I'd be happy to add it to the programme of members' briefings over the coming year. I seem to have generated some.
I was going to say, just a point. I wasn't here on the day, but when you did your induction, I believe there was a video, wasn't there?
Yeah, that was done the day. Right?
The tech, all the voice, the whole way through that, the commentary was all by AI. So yeah, it's being used already here, and I use it in my day-to-day job as well. So yeah, I'm certainly not scared of it. I think, like Councillor Mears highlighted, I don't disagree that we shouldn't be using it. I think we just need to be careful how we use it. And now I've opened up a question. So Councillor Lee, then Councillor Quinn, and then I think we'll call that one a day and we'll move on. Thank you.
It's in use right now in this meeting with the processing of our video and our voice. We use it day in, day out in the council, in Outlook and Teams and other platforms. We're already using it extensively. If the governance framework isn't there in place, we should turn off Outlook, we should turn off Teams, and we should definitely turn off YouTube.
I just point on that. I've been led to believe YouTube doesn't always work with the translator, but you're right, it does work most of the time. Councillor Quinn.
I just really want to echo some of the points made by Councillor Lee. I've definitely seen some posts by councillors on social media that look like they're in the format that ChatGPT would write. It looks like they've been copied straight across. I don't use ChatGPT obviously to write my posts for me, but I have used AI to help in the councillor role. And I do think we should be honest that the council has been slow to adapt to AI, and I don't think that's an insult because pretty much every organisation has been slow to adapt to AI technology. And so we're definitely, we need to acknowledge that, but it's definitely not unique to us.
I certainly don't get ChatGPT to write my post for me. Right, okay. Moving on. If no one has got any questions, thank you very much. That takes us on to short-term plan and mid-year progress report. Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. So these are the progress updates for the first 6 months of the year, which is a sort of key part of our performance management approach, which was referenced earlier under Councillor McIntyre's portfolio update. So we've got 2 annexes here for you. The first is an update against the short-term plan July to December, which was agreed in July at the beginning of the new council term. The second is Annex B, which is the mid-year report against the annual plan 23-24, which was agreed in February. They're quite lengthy documents, but hopefully they give us sort of a really thorough overview of the work that's being carried out by services across the council. In the covering report, there's a bit of an overview of where we are with performance. In terms of the short-term plan, the 79% of the objectives are completed or on track and not yet due, and the remainder are in progress or have some risk attached to them. And then in terms of the mid-year annual plan report, 80% are completed or on track, which is actually a slightly higher performance than we were at the same time last year, and 81% of our indicators have met targets. So these reports will be going on to the executive next week, and so we're really happy to take any questions or observations from the committee and try and answer them with the officers that we have here, or obviously come back to you. And in any observations you'd like to make, we will table at the executive next week. And then I suppose just to mention, looking forward, at your meeting in January, we'll bring you the first draft of the annual plan for next year, so you can have a look at the targets that are set out in that draft.
Thank you, Sarah, and I would like to thank you for all the work that I know you put into this. And I know I asked a whole pile of questions, as did Councillor Noble, at the chair's briefing, which I know you have made relevant changes. So thank you very much. This report obviously doesn't suddenly appear. There's a lot of work, and I'm pretty sure GPT doesn't do this. Maybe that's where you're missing a trick. Okay, so. I have some questions, but I'm going to open up the floor first. Have we got any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report. Again, it's another really good one, in my opinion. It's first page of the report, page 57.1.1, and it says that the new council began strongly with a clear focus, and I think that's absolutely true, given that 37 out of the 52 points on the short-term plan are already complete. So I just need to apologise. The one point I'm going to bring up is the point that is red on the annual plan update. So paragraph 1.12, and this relates to the playground refurbishment in Whitmore Road in Bagshot. It's already over a year late, and it's suddenly become a lot more urgent because National Highways recently closed without any notice the footpath from that part of Bagshot to Lightwater Country Park. So hundreds of people now have no access to their place of recreation, so including a lot of children. So I know Surrey County Council have been dragging their feet on this, and that's why it's delayed. But it is now urgent, and people are being harmed due to lack of recreation in that area.
I brought up the point at the chair's briefing, and I know Mr. Stevens will be happy to answer the question. Not that I'm sure you've got much more information than before.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Yes, so we had a meeting with Surrey County Council this afternoon, in fact, to try and expedite this and move it forward. You are right, the delay at the moment is very much with the county because of the complexities over the land ownership and rights of access. They are pushing forward with a lease arrangement that means we can occupy. We also had conversations around the contribution as well that county are providing. So there's an apportionment of cost in relation to the borough and the county. We have clearly set out to the county that, given the fact that everything has escalated in price recently, the contribution that they put forward doesn't really touch the sides anymore, so we're asking for more money. In addition to that, I know that Damien, our Chief Executive, is very keen to write to the County Council to try and push this forward at a higher level, and that letter will be going out very shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
That's really great to hear, thanks. There's another play park in Connaught Park as well that's due on the capital programme, Albert Road, and I think it was actually due for next year under the Joint Prosperity Fund, but perhaps it's this financial year. Is there any way to expedite that as well? I mean, the bridge is going to be closed for up to 2 years, potentially even longer, so the quicker we can move on these things, the better.
Thank you again, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Chair. That's not an answer I can give you with immediate effect. Now, clearly there is a works programme that our Green Spaces team work through, and generally there's a sequencing to that. We can look to shuffle things around, but we do need to be mindful that there's only a finite amount of resource within that service, and to add additional workload over a shorter period of time is going to be quite a challenge. But let me check with the officers and I'll come back to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Councillor Wheeler, all I can see is your hand. Sorry, that's it.
It's probably the best way to view me. I suppose really it's just having a little bit more detail. So some of the matters here provide a list of, and it says that it's complete, but we don't have the list. There's another point that says explore opportunities to empower more local residents, for example, encouraging more residents, which says that it's complete, but we've got no sight of what it actually is or what it constitutes. And I just wondered if it's possible to have a little bit more detail to come through on some of these matters, please.
Yeah, I do take your point. So, Sarah, over to you.
Yes, certainly. I mean, we have some more detail sitting behind, particularly the ones that are complete. We can certainly send a bit more evidence around if that's helpful.
Thank you, Sarah.
I think the point is this is probably, I don't want to use the word unwieldy, but I will because it's the closest I get. It's an unwieldy document already. So if you start adding, and I don't disagree, but start adding more stuff in, it becomes even bigger. So maybe if that, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe there's a summary sheet that if it's been completed, it can be an added annex that says this was completed and a bit more detail on that maybe. And I know a lot have been completed. But off the back of that, there's things like complete and work ongoing. And there's a number of those, and I struggle to see how it can be complete and there's work ongoing. So maybe we need to try and pick on those as well. I mean, I've got one here specifically, use assets to attract new entrepreneurial business and startups. It's randomly one I've picked. It says complete and work ongoing. So and there are a number of them, I'm not going to pick them all, but it's another point that, you know, is it complete or is it ongoing still?
And Chair, I must admit, I'm slightly allergic to the phrase ongoing because it kind of captures so many different things. I think sometimes a piece of work is complete because there are no further actions, because it's a kind of one-off thing. Once it's done, it's done. But there are some actions where you put something in place, but you are continuing to roll out the arrangement. You've built up a set of relationships, you're continuing those relationships going forward. Personally, I think the steer is it's confusing to have both. So if the job is done, even if there is an ongoing bit, we should just say it's done and maybe remove the word ongoing just to avoid that confusion.
Thank you. Any other questions? That's Councillor Quinn, isn't it? Yeah, Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, so at the very end of the report is assess provision of children's activity and play equipment. And it says there's going to be ward-based gap analysis. Obviously, that needs to be done before specific locations for play and the budget can be agreed for them. So has that ward gap analysis been done? Can that be shared with members?
I'll do my best to answer this one, Councillor Quinn. So effectively, if you remember the Improving Places Working Group, Sue McCubbin presented a report that talked about the playground strategy that we've got, the work programme that we currently have in place, and then put forward a request for councillors to suggest any additional areas of play, any areas of play that needed improvement or enhancement. And I know that herself and Nikki Shirlow are engaging with you about an additional area of play in St Michael's Ward as well. That's effectively what the gap analysis is. Initially, it's engagement with you as ward councillors, and then we'll look beyond that to see whether there are other locations where we can enhance and improve, and clearly try and find the funding for that. There are funding pots available, but they are relatively scarce, so we need to be quite selective about what we do, and obviously consider the ongoing maintenance liability that new areas of play will create for us as a local authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Just a couple of small points, I'll raise them both at the same time. On page 63, Theme 8 is about the enhanced finance team. I was wondering, looking at the costs that come later on the revenue budget, is it possible that this enhancement of the finance team could actually pay for itself? Better controls, better procurement, but also fewer agency staff, which seem to be quite a big cost. And sorry, the second point I'll raise at the same time, page 66 on theme 7, installed car charging points. And there's a long delay waiting for the DNO to connect up. The DNOs have got a notorious reputation of being terrible for customer service. So if we're planning they're definitely going to do it in December, we should have a plan B because they might not. Thanks.
So is that Bob? Yeah. Mr. Watts, Bob Watson, and then.
I can
or
answer,
no,
I can
Leanne,
answer
go
this.
on.
Well, I can answer the first part. You're right. I know when Mr. Watson was putting together his proposal, that was the points you made around reducing agency staff and improving efficiency and the financial stability. They were all parts of the decision-making process when we looked at the costs. So that is, yeah, absolutely part of the reason that we agreed it when it came through.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in relation to the charging, we are reliant on the DNO, unfortunately, to connect the charges to the supplies. It is a challenge and it was a known risk. I obviously don't have my portfolio holder here now to speak for it, but I know she is endlessly pursuing myself and Cameron to ensure that we are chasing Connected Curb, who are in turn chasing the DNO, to ensure this is done as quickly as possible. We acknowledge that we started a project and unfortunately we haven't completed it yet, and we would dearly love to because we know that there is a demand for those charges. As soon as we have a absolutely concrete date, we will provide that.
Just off the back of that, I've got another question, but off the back of that one, I'm guessing we're not paying for it because it's not working, but are we losing car parking because we can't use those parking spaces, or are they using them anyway?
You'll be pleased to hear the public are using them anyway, and we're encouraging that. The signage is, well, actually the posts are due to go in this Friday, particularly in Heatherside Ward. So there is slow progress. We're trying to do as much as we possibly can prior to connection. And sorry,
is it costing us anything?
The second part of your question.
Yeah, is it costing us anything?
No, it's not costing us anything, and clearly it is costing Connected Curb because they're losing income from utilising those charges. So they are equally as eager as we are to see this finished.
I've got a question. I noticed that Mr. Chania is on, and I've got a question. I know you explained this to us at one of the planning meetings, but it's in this paper. So it's page 92. It's the appeals dismissed against council refusal. And I know 65% is the target and higher is better. And I know it's low, but I also know why. But I think it would be worthwhile explaining to the committee as to the reason why, if you can.
Thank you, Chair, and evening, councillors. Yes, I can. So the low performance for the past 2 years has been inconsistent, with high performance for the 8 previous quarters in 21, 22, 22, 23. And just to give a context to the councillors, we were the 5th highest performing local authority in 2021 as well. It's fair to say that the quality of the inspectors' decisions vary, and the council have received a number of decisions where the local authority has followed the policies consistently, and the planning inspectorate have taken a different view on the decisions. We have written, obviously, a letter of complaint to the planning inspectorate, and this was advised to the planning committee last month, and we're waiting for that feedback from the planning inspectorate itself. I suppose, as you know, planning is very subjective, and it seems to me a lot of the decisions we're getting from the planning inspectorate are very different to our own, and I suppose there will need to be some ongoing learning internally about being adaptable to the decisions going forward and looking at our reasons for refusal as well. So this is an ongoing piece of work, but I think it's fair to say that officers are being consistent with the decisions and are adopting the plan accordingly, also adopting the residential design guide accordingly as well, and also the character area SPDs. To sum it all up, it is disappointing that the decisions have gone against us because we've been quite consistent up to now. And I think there's been quite a different sort of view from the planning inspectorate on these decisions going forward. I hope that answers your question, Chair.
Thank you. It does. I say I was aware of it, but I think it's valid to actually bring it up in this meeting as well, because it's obviously, we are, as you say, historically we've been quite high in our figures. That's on correct, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a final point from me on this agenda item on page 111, near the top, benefits processing new. This is about housing benefit claims, and I definitely take the point in the notes about how this is measuring how most difficult cases really are being dealt with. However, it is again outside the target, above the target. So I'm just wondering, is there a solution possible? Because people not getting their housing benefit claims processed quickly can have a really detrimental effect, especially on vulnerable people.
Mr. Watson.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. I think it is in the text there that what we've seen is a change in the nature of housing benefit claims. A lot of the simple claim processes are now being processed through the DWP, universal credit and those systems. So what we now have is the more complex areas, and these do take a long time to work through, make sure we get them right. A lot of the time the delay is actually in evidence being provided to the team to allow us to make the assessment. So we do try where we can. We will always try and do personal intervention with people and get them to come in and work with us on it. Yes, we're always trying to make it better. And although our target there does seem to be below the target we've set ourselves, the feedback we get from DWP is actually our benefits processing is very good and in top quartile. But we always strive to make it better because we recognise that these people come to us needing money because they're vulnerable, and we do process as fast as we can.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that and what's in the text. I wonder if the target is perhaps too difficult to reach.
My view would be on all targets that if you don't make them difficult to reach, you don't strive for excellence.
Yeah, thanks.
Councillor Noble, then Councillor Lee, and then I've got one more.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. HQL09 on page 94 refers to Frimley Healthcare. I can't see any reference in this document to Surrey Heathlands, which is the commissioning authority for healthcare for the villages, and I'm just concerned that there's no accountability for Heartland, to the residents of the villages as regards healthcare. Is there any opportunity to amend the plan or have some accountability within the plan for our residents?
So which HLQ was it?
09.
On which page, sorry?
Page 94.
94. I missed that. 94. Yes, okay. 98.
Sorry, 98.
Is that going to be Mr. Stevens?
Yes, that would be me. Thank you, Councillor Noble. Yes, I acknowledge it does say Frimley ICS on there. I believe we've had a similar conversation about making sure that we're encompassing the entire borough previously, and it's exactly the same with this one as well. We are predominantly within Frimley ICS, we have to concede that, but we wouldn't want to disregard any part of the borough. So both ourselves and the ICBs acknowledge there is always a greying of the lines when it comes to borough boundaries and the ICB boundaries as well. And this does encompass all of Surrey Heath.
Thank you. Councillor Lee and then Councillor Wheeler.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Let me go and find the page. So I think it's page 120, ERC 05. So it's in terms of the CMS system. So that's running on something called Drupal 7. If you cast your mind back to 2011, that's before the London Olympics, Drupal 7 came out. It was due to go end of life this summer. And a bit like Windows 7, if you remember that from the past, it got a little bit of a cheeky extension, which it's had. I think that's just an observation in terms of where we're at technology-wise. We're relying on something that's well over a decade old and probably 6 or 7 years out of date. So I think it's keeping an eye on those things. It's great to see that we're looking to move forward, but it's slightly worrying that we're kind of on borrowed time for the end of use of that system, something so critical to our business.
Yeah.
It's probably easier to ping me a note afterwards.
I think it is, but the issue about, as always with software suppliers and systems that the council run systems on, they eventually go out of support, they have to be upgraded, and there's an additional cost involved. Often the dates that those items go out of support are extended in the way that sometimes Microsoft products are extended. That's certainly been the case with Drupal. But I don't know whether it's the case in this particular circumstance. But I can speak to the lead officer on this and come back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was extended. So previously it was due to go EOL, I think July this year, and then it's been slipped to January 25, although it says 2024 there.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. It was actually just to reassure Councillor Noble that it is constantly, and everyone is constantly reminded about Surrey Heartlands, but actually the majority of the GP services at both West End, Chobham, because they're the ones that sit within Surrey Heartlands, do tend to refer, because it's where the patients prefer to go, to Frimley ICS. It's much more unusual, particularly for West End residents, to go to Ashford and St Peters. It's just not where we think of going. And so we actually benefit from a lot that Surrey Heath does, and a lot that Surrey Heath ICS pays to support us to do, even though we're in the Surrey Heartlands catchment area. And it's the same with provision for support for food banks and things. They sit within those areas that serve us, because Beetham don't serve the villages. So we've moved quite a long way.
Thank you. I've got a note here, and I can't remember if okay, the point is number of meals at home. I've got here that I've put down, it's down 1686. So I suppose my question is that anything to do with costs and people not being able to afford it? That's my first question. Second question is, and this is on page 110. And then number of referrals to social prescribing. So the target was 650. We're only halfway through the year and we're already at 823. So my question is there more resource that's needed for that, or are we coping with what it is? Because obviously there's a lot of social prescribing going on. So it's 110, page 110. It's number of meals at home, which is the third one down, and then number of referrals to social prescribing, fifth one down.
Thank you, Chair. I will need to speak to our community services colleagues to understand exactly why there is a drop in quarter four in relation to those figures. In relation to where we currently are, my belief is that we're increasing the demand quite rapidly. So I'll provide you with an up-to-date figure across the piece, if that's okay, and the same in relation to social prescribing.
No, that's fine. Thank you. conscious of time. I think we're on target. Has anyone got one last question? Oh, I shouldn't have asked. Councillor O'Mahony.
I'd just like to go back to the benefits processing. Just two quick questions. One, the 21.7, that's our target of 20 days. That's just full days, Saturdays, Sundays. It's not 20 working days. And secondly, the last piece of the tariff of the details underneath, where it says that new claims processing stands at 21.7 days and changes at 3.2 days. Can you just explain what that means?
Yes, I can't confirm. I'll check back with the team, but I believe it's working days on the days we're looking at, but I'll double confirm with the team.
That's a month, essentially.
Yeah, I'll double check with the team and confirm it. Changes. So obviously, every time someone who's on benefits has a change in their universal credits or any DW.
It's not a change. This is in relation to the benefits processing new. So it's not the.
Yeah, yes, I know. But you said, what's the difference between?
Well, it's the statement underneath the benefits processing new where it says 21.7 days and changes at 3.2. You say that relates to.
Yes, so
right.
change. So we have new claims coming in where someone comes in and has to provide all the documentation we need and double check that and go back and confirm, and then we check back with the various other agencies. When people are already on benefits, they will get their universal credit changed, and the nature of universal credit is it can change on a multitude of factors. Once we get that information that they're getting paid more or less universal credit, we have to adjust the amount of housing benefit we will either pay to people on these things, council tax benefit. So that's why the changes are done quicker, because they're actually easier to do because we get the information in. We've already got their base information. We get the information from the other agencies like DWP that say this person is now getting different levels of other benefits, which allows us to adjust them. So we still have to do changes, but we still do new, and new ones take longer to do because you've got to verify all the data that people are providing.
It was just the fact that was mentioned in benefits processing new, as opposed to as a separate section below. So I was just
sorry,
it was just I was trying to. I'm missing something.
That's very
but,
represented.
yeah, okay.
The changes is a separate section. Sorry.
You're pushing. Okay, go on. Quick.
Okay, I'll try and make it as quick as I can. Same page, benefits processing changes, and we've got the target down as 5 days, lower is better. I'm going to go on a bit of a whirlwind back right to the start of the meeting. I circled it. Page 15. It's got benefits processing changes as the target is 10. I circled it originally because I found it surprising that our target was over 300% of what we're currently processing at. Is the right target 5 days for that, or are these different targets?
I will double check, but I think you might find that we've just got a typo on one of these.
Okay.
I'll confirm which one it is.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, that really was quick. Right, okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is item 9, Revenue Budget 23-24. Who's Councillor McIntyre?
I know this is the bit you've all been looking forward to for the whole evening. I was quite surprised that the fireworks came early because
still more to come.
Definitely more to come. Okay, right. So this is the revenue budget report for quarter 2, 23-24, with the quarter end date of 30th of September, and it's based on the budget set in February 2023. As you will see, there's a small underspend against Q2 target or budgets, but the year-end forecast is looking at a 411,000 overspend. Whilst clearly an overspend is undesirable, there is a lot of focus on ensuring that our revenue growth is where we need it to be, and reducing spend and gaining efficiencies as much as possible. I am assured that it is normal, as per previous years, that at this point in the year there is a likelihood that the target or the year-end forecast generally does look at a forecast and overspend, but that over the next 2 quarters of that is brought in line so that we achieve the target that was already set. That doesn't sit comfortably with me, if I'm honest. I think we should have a running forecasting process where we know what's going to happen throughout the year, and I know that's something that Mr Watson has addressed through the financial stabilisation strategy, which we've already talked about this evening. And by utilising the team as business partners with the services, that is something that we will be looking to improve. You'll all also be pleased to know that we're currently going through the budget process for 24-25. I have to say at this point that it is a thoroughly interesting, insightful and challenging process for all of us involved. But I just wanted to say thank you to all the officers and especially Mr Watson's finance team, who are putting in a huge amount of time and effort to get us to a point where we are aware of all the discussions that we need to have. So just preempting questions. Obviously, a number of the questions that you'll probably ask will be better placed for portfolio holders and relevant officers who may not be here this evening. So you're more than welcome to come to the executive when everyone is present and ask them directly, or Mr Watson and myself will do our best to answer the questions, but we might have to take a number of them away.
Thank you. And this paper is going to the executive next week, isn't it? Yes. Along with the previous paper as well. Yes.
And the capital budget as well.
And at that point, I should have done what I've written down, shouldn't I, on the previous paper as well? Noted in comments. Do you want me to go back? Sorry, there was a note, because these papers have a note and comment. I've got a note here to mention there for note and comment, and I need to mention it. So what we're going to do is anything that comes up in this meeting tonight, we'll send comments back to the executive for the executive meeting on Tuesday, okay? And that'll be relevant for this, the previous one, and item 10 as well, okay? Okay, with that in mind, I think Councillor Nimmo Kang had his hand up first, then I got Councillor Quinn, then I got Councillor Wilson.
Page 129. These figures, will they, I mean, particularly finance and customer service, are they based on, like, will they change with interest rates going down? You know, are these sort of just, I mean, forecasts there, or are they going to be changing as by the end of the year?
So obviously all the forecasts that are put together are based on the information known at the point of the forecast. And as we know with interest rates, the only certain thing is that there's nothing been certain about them. And it's difficult to know exactly what will happen going forward. So that is an area that I know that the team has worked closely with the Treasury strategy and the providers to work out what that forecast should look like. But it is a bit of clearly an unknown. I don't know if Mr Watson wants to make any further comment on that.
I think you've covered it there on those. Yes.
Thank you. I think it was Councillor Quinn and then it was Councillor Wilson.
So as a new councillor, a predicted overspend by the end of the year of £411,000 sounds like a lot of money to me. Is there a chance that we can set that in context with some previous years? How much was the predicted overspend by Q2 and what percentage of the budget was that? And then also, if the chair will forgive me, a second quick point. I've noted that car parks in environment and community are responsible for £149,000 of the overspend. Now, I know no one likes increasing car park charges, but someone has to scrutinise the finances. So does the portfolio holder agree that potentially we should have really increased car parking charges in October and not delayed it to next April, considering there's this 149 spend? Thank you.
Yeah, it is cold, I must admit, but there we are.
Thank you, Councillor Quinn. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to ask your car parking question first, and I'll come back to the prior year, which actually I had anticipated I should have mentioned. So Thank you for asking that again. The car parking charges one is obviously a really tricky topic, and the decision to postpone that decision was based on having a well thought out car parking strategy. And then Mr. Stevens has already talked about it this evening. That is well underway, but we need that strategy so that it will feed into the budgeting process so that we can make whatever decisions we need to make with our eyes wide open and as a well thought out, well formed policy decision. So whilst it would be ideal to have extra revenue coming in, it would have been the wrong thing to do at that point. The questions around prior year comparisons. So the 2022-23 forecast at Q2 was forecasting a £302,000 overspend, and it came in with a favourable variance. And the 2021-22, so the year prior to that, Q2 forecast was a 1.6 million overspend, which came in under 500,000. So as you can see, each year there is a fairly, there's clearly an overspend forecast, but over the last couple of years that's been of a variable value. As I said, it is just something that seems to happen, and we will work towards reducing that so far as is possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you for the report again. And there's something, with the spend on services at about 17.5 million on the budget. Something that's not mentioned is that the council's net income is about 13.5 million, I think I'm right in saying. So the budget, as you said, that was set by the previous administration, already expected about a 4 million deficit. And as we've seen, that's grown, and there's all sorts of other external factors that seem to have made it grow. So the previous administration were basically planning for 4 million, 5 million, 6 million or so deficit this year, next year, and so on. And I think the forecast non-earmarked reserves are about 9 million. So you don't have to be a mathematical genius to work out that they were intending to take the council to one destination, really, and that's bankruptcy. So I was just wondering, do you think they made a mistake? I think Councillor McIntyre will probably have to answer this, not Mr. Watson. Do you think the previous administration made a mistake, or do you think it was a pre-election budget designed for consumption of the voters at that time? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I think going through the budget process has been enlightening. I think there's a few things that I probably would have expected to have been in the prior year forecasts that haven't been. I cannot speculate on why or why not they were there. I think that would be unfair of me. Having said that, I do think there are things that should have been included that weren't, or things that should have been known that weren't. Take from that what you will. All I can comment on is going forward. We are committed to providing and challenging ourselves to ensure that we can come up with a balanced budget that provides the residents of the borough the services that they need, and that we have to provide, and that we reduce the reliance on reserves going forward. That's not an easy task, and it is going to require a number of difficult decisions to be made. But the executive are having a number of meetings with portfolio holders, with officers, and as group, to challenge ourselves on what those decisions need to be.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge you've been set by the previous administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. So, Councillor Lee.
So page 132, town centre investment. Vacant property service charge provision is 35% of £2.2 million. So 35% is what, about £750,000 at a guess. But the overspend, I assume black is overspend, is 261,000. So we're saying we're already accounting for £500,000 non-payment of service charge in the town centre, and we're then overspent by about 260,000. And then the line below it, income adjustments including Boots rent reduction by £271,000. So we're saying we've let Boots have a haircut on the rent they pay by £271,000. I'm just wondering how good this shopping centre investment is, because by my fag packet calculations, there's £1 million hole there alone just in those two lines.
Who's going to?
Chair, if I could assist. So we don't have, I don't think, on the line our head of service for property and regeneration. It is certainly the case that when you are letting units to retailers, often within a shopping centre, there are periods, rent-free periods. Those rent-free periods are either rent-free periods that we've inherited, or they're ones that we set as part of a new lease event or new lease. The nature of rent-free periods is they are temporary, and so you take a view about the return over the period of the lease and a judgment about the level of rent-free period that's appropriate. Sometimes you provide a rent-free period because the occupier is going to bring some capital and invest in the unit, and that might be a cost that we don't have to incur because they're doing it. So there are a number of commercial factors that are taken into account to try and ensure that the council achieves the maximum return on those units. In any 1 year, some of those rent-free periods will be exiting and some of those rent-free periods will be starting. But one thing for sure is it's always part of the negotiation, and those figures will be different each year because they are all about taking a position over a longer term, but they bite in certain years and they make a bigger return in others.
If I may come back, that's quite a big bite, £200,000. But in terms of the vacant property services, that's £750,000 basically. Is that what we're saying is the whole there?
So as part of the medium-term financial strategy, the team seek to project forward an estimate of where they think they will be in terms of the numbers of units let, the number of units that are likely to fall vacant, and the speed at which any vacant units are then filled. They make a judgment based on the market at that point in time, which includes a sort of demand for certain units. As we know, the demand for light industrial is significantly high, and we have all of our units let, and the demand for retail is significantly lower, although as members know, we generally do better than the national figures in terms of occupation of our units.
I was just after clarification as to whether I was correct. That's £750,000.
That is the figure here, and it's a reflection of an estimate of future revenues compared to what actually they're projecting for this year. Is my understanding correct?
Thank you. I think Councillor Lee is projecting what are we budgeting at the start of the year for service charge, the 35%, which is about £750,000. The overspend against the budget is an additional £261,000.
So that's £1 million, not £750,000 then?
It's £750,000 that's budgeted, and then the overspend against the budget is a further £261,000. So with the maths, it's £1 million.
£1 million, thank you.
Thank you. Any Councillor Mears?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Councillor Quinn's comments on parking. I think that paper was meant to come to the executive, which was granted a summer holiday, and we didn't have in the end. You didn't have in the end, sorry. Do you think that this administration's sort of been a victim of its self-proclaimed success outlined in the unofficial statements of the leader, in that you've identified this problem, whether or not a problem, we don't have an official position yet, and now you're not moving fast enough to plug these gaps?
Thank you, Councillor Mears. So I can assure you there is a problem. Right, that's going to become apparent in the budget that we have to go through. Right? What we are not willing to do is make snap judgments and make snap decisions to make it look like we're doing something we need to make the right decisions for the residents of the borough in the right way with long-term understanding and impact. So our commitment is to have a sustainable budget that will last for decades, not just for our term. So on that basis, whether it's car parking, whether it's all sorts of other decisions, we will not be making that decision without the right analysis and the right data.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question, and it's a small question in comparison to all the figures that have been discussed here, but in view of the fact we've discussed audits, I think it's quite relevant. £77,000 increase, audit fees set by the PSAA. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to pay £77,000 extra on an audit that we're not getting. Is my understanding correct?
Okay, so Mr. Watson might have to correct me, but as a stand, it's really difficult to pay anyone anything when they haven't done anything, right? So as a policy situation, I would be challenging that we're going to be paying anything at all, let alone the over part, right? What I don't know, and which is why Mr. Watson might have to correct me, is what we're contracted to do through the framework, and that there might well be an element that we have to pay. But I am sure Mr. Watson's with me in that we certainly don't intend on spending anything more than we are contractually or statutorily required to do.
And before Mr. Watson answers that question, off the back of your point, if this is extra £77 on top, and we're already paying something for a service we're not getting, does that mean and if they sign them off as being whatever word it was I could use, do we have to pay for those audited accounts also, Mr. Watson? Or
if they're audited accounts, and clearly they've done some work, right? So I think you mean not audited accounts.
Yeah.
I stand by my previous point.
Yeah,
I've got
okay.
absolutely no intention of paying anyone anything for something they haven't actually done.
Thank you. Mr. Watson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think to put some context on it, you have to go back to the days when the Audit Commission was abolished. Part of the reasons to abolish the Audit Commission was to reduce the cost of audit for local authorities. And the government, through the PSAA, set the fees. And the fees were obviously set to make it more effective and more efficient for local authorities. Consequently, the audit firms have lobbied very hard over the last few years to say it is not sustainable to keep trust. We cannot do the audits you want us to do for the fees that have been set for us, which means they can't recruit auditors, they can't then do the audits. So it became a sort of vicious circle of where we get to. Part of the reason to try and improve the situation was recognise that these are not sustainable fees for the audit companies, and the PSAA increased audit fees by £77,000. Now, people, please bear with me on this one. This is the increase for the 22-23 audit, which we haven't even started yet. But I have to put the money into the budget to accrue for it, so we can then bring it through when we're like that. Now, the process that we go through is that we will have to pay money for the 2019-20 audits where BDO have done some work, and what the amount of work will be a discussion. They will put a fee in like that. The fee, if it is standard fee and has done the audit, then we're normally obliged to pay it through PSAA. They then will put in for any additional work they've done through what they say. And the argument they'll say is, we expected a fully perfect set of accounts and we didn't get it, therefore we had to do more work. Here's an extra bill. It's one of the ways they've actually boosted the amount of fee income they get from local authorities. But we don't just have to pay it. I personally, as the 151 officer, have to sign with PSAA that I agree these fees. So I will certainly potentially be forced or obliged to agree some of the 2019-20 overruns. The later fees, depending on the amount of work they've done and what they have done, I would certainly strongly say this is not a viable thing to pay. And obviously, as you've heard from my portfolio holder, she is not in favour of paying anybody anything for something they've not done.
I think that becomes very clear. Thank you very much. Right, short question, because I'm conscious of the time now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Whilst I'm always a fan of not paying for things that haven't been done, we do have to make sure that we're sitting on the right side of the fence. And I think it's fair to say with BDO, I believe there was an incident of some paperwork that was left in a drawer for 6 weeks by one of your predecessors, Bob Watson. And I suspect it's probably worth reflecting on that point, which, to be fair, is not BDO's fault. It's definitely not your fault. But it is certainly the fault of the individual that left it in that drawer for 6 weeks and didn't fill it in as was requested, which has perhaps left us in a slightly awkward position with BDO, where I think we should always reflect that we are not entirely blameless as a council, shall we say, even if it's predecessors. Mr. Watson.
Thank you very much. If I can reiterate what I've just said, the 2019-2020 accounts we will get a bill for, we'll have to look at it, and that's where that particular issue would then come through. And I fully expect there to be an additional charge on the 2019-2020 accounts. I mean, luckily they're not being paid by the hour, because we're now into the fifth year of it. Yes, the times I was talking about where we consider whether we are going to agree the bill is for the later accounts for 2021, 21-22 and potentially 22-23, where, as we discussed earlier, there may be a disclaimer by the audit firm on those accounts, and they're disclaiming it on not having time to do the audit, so therefore they haven't got it. And if I could put some context on it, the 2022-23 accounts, there is a total of 5 councils in the country that have had their accounts signed off by the auditors at this point in time. So there's over 1,000 outstanding audits now in there. If they all get disclaimed, I'm very certain I will not be the only Section 151 officer in the country saying, hang on, we're not paying them for things they haven't done.
Thank you. And on that note, I think we'll go on to the next item, which is capital budget. More fireworks.
No. But the second most exciting report of the evening. Right, so this is, just to remind you, Chair, for noting.
Just for the point, I covered that in the so I can cover it just in case I forgot.
Right, so this is progress against the capital programme for 2023-24 and the first half of this financial year. The noting required is a reprofiling of the budget to future years. So total spending commitments is at 2.209 million versus a budget of just over 13 million, with an underspend forecast for the full year of 7.8 million, with a balance of 7.563 million, profiling into future years. The detailing, or the detail of this, it can be seen in the paper at paragraph 1.5. There is some of the rationale behind this is all around where are we going to invest our capital. There is a detailed review ongoing, underway at the moment across the council to work out and agree what our strategy is and therefore the associated capital requirements. Open to questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, and thank you again for the report. So this capital budget was set by the previous administration about 9 months ago, and it has failed. It's not a working budget. Most of the funds have to be reprofiled into the next year. Most of the projects can't happen this year, so it hasn't survived first contact with reality. And so I'm just wondering, I guess it probably has to be Councillor McIntyre that answers this one as well. were mistakes made by the previous administration? And what is the cost involved in not having a workable capital programme for the council? I mean, there's an opportunity cost because we could have had a proper capital programme. We could be investing in things that benefit our residents, but we're not because of what was chosen last February. And have things like, has any borrowing or borrowing facilities been taken out in anticipation of funding this unworkable programme? Are there any other officer costs that have been incurred by having an unworkable programme? Thanks.
Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm going to be looking at some of my officer colleagues. Probably not quite the right one, Mr. Stephens, but I'm going to look at it anyway. So, the capital programme is a collection of a number of different high-profile and lower-profile activities, which all require quite hefty investment. To answer some of your questions directly, there's been no, and Mr. Watson, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding that there's no borrowing being taken out in anticipation of doing any of this, and that there is no funding requirements, that we're paying for no need as such. There's clearly officer time being spent looking at the proposals, drawing up options, and there is, I know, because I'm part of a number of the groups, that we're spending time looking at what the art of the possible is. Some of the challenges are clearly to do with the economy and the interest rates, and that is outside of the council's sphere of influence. What we are aiming to do as part of just determining where we're going to use the capital budget is to have a very clear view on what we need to achieve and how best to get there, and the glide path to get there with the least amount of funding requirements that will tie us in for a long period of time. So we are absolutely dedicated to making sure we are taking the right decisions for the long-term sustainability of the council. I don't think I'm in a position to be able to give any more detail behind it, because there's a lot of conversation going on, and that it's changing obviously quite a lot, quite often. But as part of the budget process, when we come to present that, there will be more clarity over our plans.
Great, thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Any other questions? Councillor Lee.
Yeah, so there's a page on, I think it's the Square Camberley's website about refurbishment for something called Cambridge Square. I'm guessing that's the same one. There's a little line. It's been deleted from the web page, but it's still there if you look at the archive. The building had very little investment for several years and was in need of a refresh. I guess that kind of sums up a lot of the square, really. And obviously the leaky roof and stuff like that. It's more of an observation, really.
Thank you for your observation. Any other questions? No other questions. Sorry. Thank you. And just to make sure that I've covered it off, any points that are made tonight will be referred back to the executive for items 7, 8, 9 and 10. And thank you for all your input, everybody. And thank you to the officers for all their time and effort on the papers. So the last item on the agenda at 21:25 is the work programme. There has been a couple of changes which I know have been made. We've added in the draft parking strategy, which will be coming to the January meeting, just before it goes to the executive in February. Apart from that, has anyone got any questions, points, observations on the work programme? Speak now or forever hold thy peace. No? Sorry.
Only a small thing, which is you have the draft annual plan, has been mentioned earlier, Chair, which is coming to the January meeting. I think it's going to be the corporate strategy and draft annual plan. They'll be coming together.
And I can see a copious note being made, so that's fine. Any other points? No. In which case, I thank everybody for their input tonight. Thank you for all your questions. Obviously, people have read the papers, which is always promising. Thank you for your questions and your time, and have a good rest of your evening. Thank you.